hello, everyone. This is State Rep Kate Lipper-Garabedian, and thank you for joining us for another Conversations with Kate. I'm very excited to be sitting down today with Chris Cinella and Jennifer Grigoraitis from the Melrose City Council, our two most recent and current City Council presidents. And so we're just going to have a little bit of time to chat about their first session as City Councilors, sort of do a recap, and then we're very lucky as Melrose to have them signing up for another term beginning in January, so we'll look a little bit at what's ahead. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, sure. So maybe we could start with just giving everybody a little bit of a brief background. Let us know about maybe your family here in Melrose, and then what you're doing professionally outside of City Council. Do you want to start, Jen?
Sure. Thank you again for having us, and thanks to MMTV for hosting this. So my name is Jen Grigoraitis. I represent Ward 6, which is the part of Melrose that stretches from Mount Hood just past Main Street to the train tracks. It is the best ward in the city. And I live here with my husband, Bill, our two boys, one of whom is at the Winthrop School, one of whom is at MVMMS, and our yellow lab, Clementine. And during the day, I am the chief of staff for the Massachusetts Office for Victim Assistance, which is a state agency that works with victims of crime.
Excellent. And Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again for having us, and as well as MMTV. So I am Chris Cinella, City Councilor at Large and current Council President. Grew up here in Melrose, but didn't always live here. Lived outside Melrose for 10 years in a neighboring town, one street over.
Boo hiss.
I know. So at the time, my wife didn't want to live too close to the in-laws, so I went one street over.
Okay.
My mother won't listen to this, so I can say that. But during the day, I own the Edward Jones Investments right in downtown Main Street. So
great.
But I live in Ward 2, which is the best ward in Melrose.
Those are fighting words.
I have two boys as well. CJ, who will be 13 in a couple days.
Oh, excellent.
And Jacob, who's 7. Jacob goes to the Horace Mann. CJ goes to the middle school.
Excellent.
Yep.
So you're listening right now to 3 parents, each with 2 boys.
Yes.
So we all can commiserate on some of the fun things about being boy moms and dads. Well, thank you both again for being here. That's really helpful to get a sense of what you're working on professionally and how that may inform some of the work that you're doing on City Council. Jen, your work supporting families across the Commonwealth and thinking about policy issues that really impact them, and then how that may drill down to the local level and, our neighbors here in Melrose. And Chris, obviously, being a small business owner, I know you've been really involved in Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce over the years, and having a real lens into that community as well. We're really lucky to have you bringing your perspectives to City Council. So we all served together for, I think, about 6 weeks on City Council to start 2020. I remember, heading out and all the hugs, right, all crammed into a little room, and then shortly thereafter, everything shifted. So it's been quite a year and a half for you all to serve on City Council. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what that's been like. Jen, you were the first City Council president for this session, all of 2020, and I know that you had to lead on a lot of efforts to pivot in light of COVID. And you want to talk a little bit about that and how the work unfolded for City Council as we dealt with the pandemic?
Sure, absolutely. And I think I speak for all of our colleagues when we say that we were sad to lose you on the council, but very happy to send you to the State House. So I do remember that day of your departure, and that feels like it was the last time things were really quote unquote normal. So we had a meeting in March where we were in the chamber, and I think we moved the desks apart a little bit. This is March of 2020. And then everything shut down rapidly, as we all remember. And for the first time in the history of this community, all of our meetings went to a remote platform, and that had never been done before. And we were completely unprepared for it. But I think thanks to a lot of efforts of both City Hall staff and a really flexible group of counselors, we were able to make it work. We didn't miss a single meeting. We had support from both IT and the staff in the clerk's office to get set up on WebEx. I remember we did a Saturday practice session where we all logged in from home. And again, it was a group of 9 new counselors and 2 veterans. Most of us had only known each other for a couple months. You chat on the campaign trail, get to know each other, and suddenly we're literally peering into each other's living rooms, bedrooms, home offices. So I think even though we were apart, it kind of formed a level of familiarity that we may not have had in a quote-unquote normal session. So we made it work, and people kind of both adapted to being home and running a council meeting with all that is happening in your home, as you talked about, all the children.
Sure.
And the pets and the spouses. But also we had to kind of adapt how we function. The council follows Robert's Rules of Order, which is a lot of motions and things like that. And I think people really had to kind of adapt how we did business to a remote platform. And I think it worked, but it was definitely it was a challenge. And I think our colleagues were really up to the challenge for it.
That's great. I mean, it's really a real impressive thing that we didn't miss a single meeting, right? And that's a real testament to all of your hard work and your colleagues and folks at City Hall. And you also then had to stand up, in addition to standing up a separate sort of approach to the meetings, there were functions of city government that had to continue, but in a different way. So I'm thinking, for example, about the 2020 election and all the work that went into that. You want to just touch on that briefly?
Absolutely. I mean, that is run by our incredible elections division and clerk's office and City Hall staff. And it was, I think, probably the most complex election that has ever happened in this city and likely in this country. We had vote by mail for the first time here. We also had expanded early voting at City Hall. And we had consolidated polling, all to give folks as many options for how to vote and to be able to do so in a way that felt safe to them. I think it can be hard for all of us to remember what life felt like a year ago pre-vaccines, but there was certainly a real concern about having a lot of people in a closed space for a long period of time. We still have that concern today, but even worse then. And so it was basically like running 3 different elections at once. And I think there was a lot of scrutiny and interest, which was both exciting but also really nerve-wracking. And I think the city did a great job, and I'm also excited to see, and I know there's been some work by the legislature to extend some of those opportunities for people to have different ways to vote. And we saw some of that in play this year.
Exactly. It was nice that we could extend it for 2021, and I'm very hopeful that the House and the Senate will agree on a compromise bill that gets to the governor's desk so that we can continue some of these flexibilities to encourage safe, participatory democracy moving forward. And I would say I think the City Council played an important role in all of that as well, sort of vetting and talking through the processes and then sharing it with the community to provide a level of familiarity and trust in the system. So I'm grateful for the work that you all did on that as well.
Thank you.
So that's 2020, and we could talk a lot more about that. But in 2021, Chris, you took on the City Council President role. And, you know, I think there have been some really critical investments the City Council has vetted and approved in the city, for example, the library. And so maybe you could share a little bit about that process and how it's been as City Council President this year.
Yeah. So, that passed a few weeks ago, month ago. As we all know, the library is a very cherished community space. I think it was, for many of us on the council, who's, at least for me at least, I shouldn't speak for everybody, but whose children are a little older, aren't spending a lot of time at the library as much as you did when your kids were younger. At least for us, I know my wife uses it a lot, but we did way more when CJ was younger. When we lived in Stoneham, actually, we came to the Melrose Public Library. But then as time goes on, and now Jacob, who's a little hyperactive, we didn't spend so much time there. But I think it was eye-opening because for us, where we went on the tours and met with Linda Gardner, who's very passionate about that space, and you can just feel it when she gives the tour, and what we saw in that building, it was like many of our buildings in tough shape.
Right.
So I know the community was very excited that we were able to get that grant and get that put through.
Yeah.
And so
it's really great, I think, to have that level of state investment. It's encouraging, as the state rep, to put money into that every year, and then to see it such a significant amount come back directly to the community is wonderful. And it was a unanimous vote, which I know there was a lot of, process behind that. And I would say that's somewhat is a testament to you as the president to sort of ensure that people felt like they had the sufficient information to feel confident in their support of it.
That's one of the things that I really tried to hammer home with all the counselors, to make sure that they had every question answered, every document that they wanted to see, regardless of what their decision was going to be. I did not want anyone going into a meeting for a final vote without having everything that they felt that they asked for.
Right.
And the administration, I think, was great at providing that to us. So,
well, good. Yeah. Well, thank you for my family and on behalf of other folks. I think it's both younger kids, but certainly I remember when door knocking was possible safely, there were a good number of older folks in the community who really look forward to going to the library and being able to access the materials and use the space. So it's really for lifelong learning and access, this will be really a tremendous asset for our community.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a few different themes, sort of COVID responsiveness, starting to put things online, investment in infrastructure. I expect those are themes that may continue into a new session. And so maybe each of you could talk a little bit about, what are some of your visions, what are some of your personal priorities or vision for a city council that convenes next in January 2022. Do you want to start, Jen?
Sure. I think there's probably 3 priorities I see for us immediately. The first is helping to onboard and orient our 3 new counselors who will be joining us. We're losing 3 colleagues and gaining 3 new counselors. And I do want to give a shout out to President Cinella, because I know he's already been working behind the scenes to begin to make those folks kind of know what's happening, begin to get access to information, understand the lay of the land. And I think the benefit of our largely new group of people is that we really understand that experience in a way that probably it had been a long time. I know you were a part of a small group of new counselors. And I think we've really improved our ability to recognize that we need to orient new elected officials to their role with the city. So I think that will be exciting. I think we need to continue to focus on some of our infrastructure needs. We really, in the past session, were able to fund a lot of the identified needs on the CIP. And I think now we need to figure out what comes next and what those priorities are, both from the administration's perspective and from the community's perspective. And I also think as we hopefully continue to recover from COVID, we need to make sure that we don't lose some of the good things that came out of the pandemic. And I think remote access to meetings is one of those things. And I know we've been particularly committed as a council. And again, I want to thank Chris for his efforts around this past year and making sure that when we are back in person, we do still have remote access for those members of our community who feel more comfortable with accessing meetings that way, and or that's the only way they can do it. I think this has taught us a lot about thinking about how everyone can and cannot access government, and everything that we can do to increase access is worth doing and worth to keep doing. So I hope we do that.
Yep.
Anything else you'd add?
Well, and I think on that note with access, I think that one of the things that we could probably look into is maybe looping SDM in to help educate some of our senior, residents that can't really log on, or they just don't fully understand how to get on. And maybe I think our landing page for remote access could be a little bit simpler.
Okay.
When you go to when you go to our city's website.
Right.
I know it says it, but then you got to it's a little wonky.
That's a great idea, really. And we're so lucky in Melrose to have a nonprofit like SDM that can maybe help support and be a partner in that work.
But it's been great for younger families who can't
Absolutely.
leave the kids and run home, or run down to City Hall.
Right.
So that'll definitely be something that will stay as far as remote participation. Remote meetings, that might change, in the new year. We'll see. We have to kind of keep an eye on what's happening with the Delta variant. And the other thing is I always want to make sure like everyone on the council feels comfortable coming in. And, I made the decision to go remote because we had, 1 or 2 in-person meetings. And we had a couple councilors that were hard of hearing.
Okay.
So with the mask, it didn't help. And it kind of surprised me how much I lip read.
Right.
And
that makes sense.
So we had one counselor in particular that they were chairing the meeting, they couldn't hear the speaker at the table.
Right, because everyone was masked to be
because everyone
safe.
was masked, and then vice versa, they couldn't. So I said, we can't continue like this if they can't hear.
Right.
So.
Well, I think you've worked out a lot of the kinks probably over time
for
the remote. Any funny memories of sort of initial remote participation and some snafus at home?
So I was fortunate enough to be chairing appropriations for the first remote meeting.
Okay. This is when Jen was city council
Jen was
president.
city council
Our first
president.
meeting was an appropriations meeting on WebEx.
Yep. Now, I've never even I've been on WebEx calls, but not WebEx video. And I would say most of us haven't, except for a handful of folks. So we're just completely new technology. So we did a rehearsal on a Sunday and did kind of a mock meeting. The only difference was if you were, a participant versus a, whatever you call it, when you're in the waiting room.
Like an attendee.
There's something with that in my computer.
Okay.
So that's the only thing that had changed from that Monday night from Sunday, because it worked Sunday fine. So anyways, Monday night rolls around, my 7-year-old's all set, got his snacks, movie in the far right corner of the house. I'm down in the basement. I got my notes, everything ready to go, and now I can't get on.
Oh.
So I'm calling the city clerk. And again, it was kind of new for her as well. She's not answering. Finally, she picks up, gives me an 800 number to call. Call the 800 number, and it's like a garage in California. So I end up basically having to pack everything up, put on pants.
Of course. Well, I'm sure you were wearing, but
Yes,
you mean like professional pants.
Professional pants.
Correct. Okay. Let's clarify that.
Yeah. And then drive over to Counselor McNaught's house in the
Okay.
pouring rain. I'm banging on his door. His wife answers and wants to know what I'm doing because she knows he's upstairs in a meeting. I run up.
Speaking of rain.
Wow.
Speaking of rain,
Yeah.
I run upstairs and I had to sit on like a laundry basket. And meanwhile, Vice Chair Migliorelli had to start the meeting
Okay.
without any heads up.
So
really, and-
we should have her on sometime to describe her experience because that
Yeah.
probably also was a little frenetic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And after that, I said, "Gee, maybe all the vice chairs should kind of just be ready."
Yeah,
because you never know.
Okay.
So that was interesting because I had
Trial by fire.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that first meeting, it's basically myself and Councilor McNaught having to kind of pivot between the mics if we wanted to speak.
Got it. Okay. What about you, Jen? Any favorite memories of?
I think we've probably said goodnight to everyone's young children over the course of our remote meetings. Various kids have popped in. We've seen most people's partners. I think we've met everybody's dog. We've heard people sneeze. We've had people who can't get their camera to work, so they're just a voice through the air.
Sure.
We did have one meeting where, for whatever reason, the city clerk, who's usually kind of managing the behind-the-scenes stuff, her access stopped working, so I managed that part where I was letting people in and out of the room, the virtual room. So yeah, it's certainly.
And you'd never done that.
I'd never done that. I think I will just say again, I think our colleagues were all really good sports about it. I know there were other communities where there was a real kind of pushback on going to virtual meetings, and people for whatever reason. And I think we were all nervous and didn't really know what we were doing, but people recognized that we needed to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think those moments of levity
Absolutely.
help. But yes, it has certainly been comical.
At times,
At
but
times.
also successful in the end. And it is really wonderful to have learned from that and think about ways we'll continue to use it moving forward.
Yes, absolutely.
So we don't eat Thanksgiving dinner virtually, so maybe we'll end on a light note as well. What are your favorite dishes, or what are you most looking forward to enjoying in a couple weeks?
So I get yelled at every Thanksgiving because I fill up on the appetizers. So that,
Oh,
I
but
guess
the
that would
appetizer's
be-
the best part.
That's yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
by
mean,
the time
often.
Thanksgiving rolls up the dinner for you. I'm like,
Okay.
Yeah, and
Any
then-
particular apps that you enjoy most?
my mother usually does this prosciutto asparagus
Mm.
wrap.
That sounds lovely. All right.
Nice.
What about you, Jen?
I'm completely in it for the dessert.
Okay, so we've got both ends of the,
Yep,
the
yeah.
meal.
I mean, turkey, fine, but I really want the dessert. So I'll have to say my mom makes, it's called a Toll House cookie pie, which is exactly as it sounds. It's
Okay.
basically a cookie baked into a pie, and it's delicious. So I'm looking forward to that. She makes it every year.
That's great. Well, I will say
How about
then,
you?
since you guys have done the bookends, I'll pick something in the middle of the meal. So I'm looking forward to my mom's sweet potato casserole, which is very good. And it has those, big marshmallows sort of.
Okay, I was going to ask if there are marshmallows.
melted on top, very southern with some different spices. So
Delicious.
I'm looking forward to that.
Kind of hungry now.
Yeah, you and me. Yeah, all of us.
Yes, sounds good.
Well, thank you all again so much for your leadership. Jen as City Council President in 2020, Chris in 2021. We're very lucky as a city to have you. I want to emphasize, no one could have predicted what was going to happen, but we've really, done a great job meeting every meeting and figuring it out together, encouraging civic participation. And I'm really glad that you'll be able to build on the work to date to have a very successful next session to support Melrose. So thanks for being with me, and
Thank
glad
you.
to be working with you.
And thank you.
Same
Glad to
here.
be working with you as well.
Yeah. All right.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.